Marcela Barrera with the Investing News Network, and here with me today is Emily Hersh, who's managing partner at DCDB Group. Emily, thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi Priscilla, thank you for inviting me.
All right, so we're here at PDAC 2020.
We are.
Yeah, it's March already. I wanted to ask you, how did you expect the lithium space to perform these first few months of 2020, and has it performed as you expected, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the lithium space in general is somewhere between stalled and paralyzed. So I haven't seen any major surprises. As you know, I'm based in Latin America, and so when you look at the Latin American countries, you know, we've got Chile that has a lot of political uncertainty right now, and then we've had Argentina, which is having currency control issues that really impact projects in the country. So we've seen some interesting news, I think, out of Argentina with Ganfeng taking the majority stake in the Lithium Americas project in XR. And I think it's noteworthy that we haven't seen any major announcements of expansions from any of our Argentine projects. And then, you know, across the Andes in Chile, the announcements from Albemarle and from SQM sort of lead to a thought process that they are under pressure to maybe increase their recovery rates as their form of expansion. So I definitely haven't seen any big surprises. And I think that the sort of paralysis of new investments coming into the space is going to continue.
All right, and one big topic here at the conference, and also part of the announcements from SQM and so on, is coronavirus. So I guess my question for you would be, how is this impacting the supply chains of battery metals? And I guess what's the lessons that we're learning that could be applied to battery metals?
I think that when we look at the effects on the supply chains for battery metals, we kind of think of China as the world's factory, right? So everything goes through China for processing and manufacturing. But when it comes to the lithium market in particular, China's a lot more. You know, China's also the bank on one end, and then a large consumer market of electric vehicles on the other hand. So the impacts of the coronavirus on the lithium space are going to be threefold, right? So I think that after as the dust settles, as the smoke clears, the Chinese government will have domestic priorities and potentially impact their ability to essentially make large overseas investments in projects. At the same time, if we do have sort of a global recession, which is what people are talking about, a recession will impact electric vehicle or EV uptake, right? I think that would then slow the cycle of sort of transitioning to electromobility in general across the world. One of the things, though, that the coronavirus has done is it's shown a light on the lack of resilience that a lot of these supply chains have. And so you can probably guess, I'm no Donald Trump fan, but I think he did identify a real problem in the fact that we as a world have become hobbled by or dependent on China's role, especially in the critical mineral space, one of which being lithium. And potentially this can lead to a more specific conversation about what do we as a world want to be completely dependent on one country for the supply chains that we need for the technology of the future.
All right, so when you're talking to different players in the lithium space, you consult with maybe the country, governments, and so on. What is one of the big misunderstandings that they keep asking you this question over and over about the lithium space?
So I think the biggest misunderstanding from governments continues to be this idea that you should and could build battery factories because you have a lithium resource. And that's the one I think that's the most dangerous and the most damaging, because I think governments are under pressure, in Latin America especially, but governments are under pressure to say, you know, we are developing the resources of the country with the people's best interests in mind. But I actually saw, there's a minister of some kind going around in Mexico saying that, oh, we're going to be like Bolivia, we're going to make batteries here in Mexico because we have a lithium deposit. And first of all, Bolivia does not produce any lithium chemicals for batteries. Second of all, they would not be able to produce even cathode material. It wouldn't be a good economic decision. They're definitely not going to be producing batteries. And I got a message from a friend who's a mining secretary of another country, and he's receiving pressure in their local press saying, why aren't you like the Mexican mining minister who's promising all these things? And so that is the problem that actually hasn't gone away, and it's gotten worse. And it's not true, right? And I don't like to see governments lying to people. So I think that's the biggest misunderstanding that I wish would go away, because in my opinion, what it will lead to is 5 years from now, the people who live in a place will say, hey, you promised me a battery factory. That is impossible, and they will go against mining in their space. So I think that's the one that like we all should try to educate people on more.
All right. But when you're looking at projects and you're looking at actual resources and whatnot for maybe the investor that is watching us today, and they're trying to see, okay, who's going to be the winner in this junior mining space? What
my favorite project is Plateau Energy Metals in Peru, and I work with them on a number of areas. I also like Standard Lithium that's in Arkansas. It's a brine project in Arkansas. And I am keeping my eye on, obviously, Lithium Americas. Their Thacker Pass project in Nevada is excellent. It is well timed for this critical minerals in the United States. It's a carbon neutral, no carbon emissions because of their process. So that's one of my favorites. And then I'm keeping an eye on what's happening in California. I think that we'll see someone do something there at some point this year. I think Argentina right now is complicated, and I wouldn't put capital behind a project without a real strategy of how to understand and deal with the currency control situation. But when it comes to just in general, I think that there is a need for, if you're looking at a lithium project, you have to say, can this project get to a chemical, right? I wouldn't look at just a pure spodumene play per se. Can it go to a chemical? And then is it big, right? Is it sufficiently large that it's going to be able to attract the attention of the battery supply chain, who's going to need to do their own qualification process? If it's so small, it's just not worth it.
All right, and I've been talking to other analysts as well, and they talk about the power of partnership, right? So it's not so much only about the resource, but the company itself. What do you look at when you're looking at a company as a whole, aside from the resource?
When I look at the company as a whole, I like to see if the management and the leadership team understands what they're doing and understands the challenges, right? Working with a lithium project is challenging, and there are challenging elements to it that if a leadership team is like, oh no, but we're great and that won't be a problem for us, I'm like, it'll be a problem for anyone. So the leadership team has to be like, right, this is going to be a challenge, and that's why we have this person and this person who are experts in this area to sit and solve that problem as they come up. That's kind of my thought process on it. I think that what's the word? Pride in the lithium space is something that we should all, that's not a good characteristic. Confidence, but having the right people there so that as these challenges come up, they can handle them.
Right. And I also wanted to ask about battery technology.
Yes.
And where do you think that is headed? We hear a lot about disruptions in battery technology, but where do you think that is?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that there's one magical best battery for all applications, and that's just not the way that batteries work, because when you pick a battery chemistry, a different kind of battery technology, it's a trade-off. So you're going to get one thing and you're going to lose another thing. And I think that the best evidence for that, for people who thought we'd have all high nickel cathodes or all hydroxide in the lithium space, is Tesla's decision to use an LFP cathode for their cars that they're producing in China. They've made that decision based on the fact that the LFP cathode will do what that consumer base needs, whereas in the US a consumer base needs a different thing. And so I think that we'll see there are applications for a wide variety of battery chemistries. But then when you look at the technology space, I think the most interesting development we're going to see for lithium is the solid state battery, right? So it's the idea of saying, all right, instead of putting lithium in the cathode, we're going to get rid of the liquid electrolyte, and we're going to be able to put lithium metal in the anode. And that's kind of the holy grail of the lithium battery, because you can get energy density of, between 40 and 80% higher, right? So you can look at applications like flight even. But then even in that space, you've got people who are innovating in the solid electrolyte space. And then you have people innovating on how do you get the lithium metal into the anode? Do you electroplate it on? Do you use a foil? And so that's one of my favorite spaces, and I think that as that technology sort of comes into play, how does that lithium get into the anode? The question will then be, which of these lithium companies are making the right chemical precursor to do that? And then what does the cathode look like, right? So if you're putting the lithium in the anode, I think that your early applications will be using the existing cathodes just because they're what exists. But if the lithium's in the anodes, you don't need a lithium-bearing cathode. So a lot of these scientific questions come to play, and then as that works its way into the manufacturing space, that has implications, into the mining projects and into the lithium projects as they decide what chemical do I make, what market do I want to serve.
My last question for you today, Emily. What would you be watching in 2020? What are you most excited about? Developments, catalysts for the space?
I am most interested in seeing if the U.S. talk of becoming a player in the critical mineral space turns into a reality. There's been an executive order. There's been talk from both the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy. There's been talk from the Senate. There's talk. I want to see if that becomes action. Does the U.S. decide that they want to actually be a player in the critical mineral space, which includes lithium, or does it stay just talk? And then besides that, I think I'm really watching how the dust settles from the coronavirus, and what do we as a global society decide about what makes a supply chain resilient? What does mineral security mean? So those are my two biggest areas.
All right, Emily, thank you so much
Thanks,
for joining
Priscilla.
us today. Once again, I'm Priscilla Barrera with the Investing News Network, and here with me today is Emily Hersh, who's Managing Partner at DCDB Group.